Hello everyone, very good morning. Welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep and welcome to our daily Hindu analysis. So let's get started by first looking at the topics that we are going to cover today. But before that, we have a small announcement. This weekend on the 15th of April, we shall be conducting a free workshop exclusively on the BYJU'S Exam Prep app. Mishra sir will help you understand the syllabus for UPSC exams. This is specifically for those who are appearing for the next year's attempt. The session will also help you understand the book list needed for various subjects and the preparation strategy that you should be following. So do take the full benefit of this free workshop. All you have to do is to register for the workshop by using the link provided in the description box below. And of course, download the BYJU'S Exam Prep app. So let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu Newspaper by looking at the topics we're going to cover. We shall have a detailed analysis on three important articles that are present in today's Delhi edition of the Hindu. We will talk about the topic of alternate dispute resolution, and we will specifically look at something called as arbitration. We'll look at the status of arbitration in India and why online dispute resolution should be introduced to scale up arbitration mechanisms in India. We shall also talk about the role of parliamentary committees, and we shall look at a topic from science and technology, which is the Large Hadron Collider or the CERN particle accelerator project in Europe. We shall also look at few important prelims topics. Around 5 prelims topics are lined up for today's discussion. All right, so these are the key issues we are going to be dealing with in today's analysis. So just stay with me for the next 60 minutes. I promise you to cover the whole newspaper comprehensively. And if you're liking our initiative, just support us by pressing that like button, share your comments, and also don't forget to subscribe to our channel. So let's start with the first article. We'll look at a column from page number 6, in which the writers are arguing that India should scale up the adoption of arbitration as a form of alternate dispute resolution. They're asking for the adoption of online dispute resolution to scale up the arbitration model of dispute settlement so that India could be established as an international hub for arbitration. Many of you, especially beginners, might be wondering what is arbitration, what is alternate dispute resolution. So let's understand this topic from the very basics, from the scratch. See, when two parties, when they have a dispute between them, when there is a legal clash between them, we approach the courts, we approach the judiciary, we expect the judiciary to resolve the dispute for us. But I hope you know that the moment you approach the judiciary to resolve a particular dispute or to settle a conflict or to seek justice, the moment you approach the judiciary for any of these reasons, you are entering into a hostile conflict with the other party. Let's say there are two parties involved in a case, party A, party B. The moment you seek judicial recourse for settling the dispute, you are entering into a hostile dispute settlement. Because any judicial proceeding, any trial in a court, it is going to be confrontational. Both the parties will bring their counsels, their respective lawyers, and they will present arguments and counter arguments. They will bring up evidence against each other. So any court trial tends to be hostile. So this may not be the best suited method to resolve disputes, especially with regard to private businesses. Also, when it comes to enforcing contracts, when two parties have entered into a contract, and if one side is not upholding their end of the deal, and if they want to resolve this dispute, and if they want to enforce the contract as per the terms of the contract, if you approach a court, you're going to enter into a hostile environment, and court proceedings, as you know, can be expensive as well, and it could also be time consuming. Is that clear? Settling such disputes and conflicts or enforcing contracts through regular judicial proceedings can not only be hostile between the parties, it will destroy the relationship, but it could also be very expensive and time consuming. And don't forget, in countries like India, the judicial system is already overburdened. There are crores of cases pending in front of the judiciary. So these cases will simply pile on to the burden of the judiciary, thereby delaying justice to the parties involved. And as you know, delayed justice is as good as denied justice. Justice delayed is justice denied. So as a result, there is another form of dispute settlement which is widely accepted around the world, which is called alternative dispute resolution. This is an out-of-court settlement which can be worked out. When two parties have a dispute, when they are seeking justice, when they want to enforce a contract, such civil cases, industrial cases, business-related cases, commercial disputes, they could all be settled through alternative dispute resolution mechanisms. Even family matters related to divorce, inheritance, etc. They could all be settled outside of the court by working out an alternate dispute settlement or a resolution. Such alternative dispute resolutions are legally recognized today, not just in India but around the world. Because in alternate dispute resolution, you will not encounter a hostile environment, especially between parties where the relationship cannot be hampered or compromised. Alternative dispute resolution is the best way to protect the sanctity of the relationship. Because the moment you enter the court for a trial, you are going to enter into a hostile legal battle. It could directly have an impact on the relationship between the parties. It could be two companies, it could be a company and a vendor, or two individuals or husband and wife. The moment you enter court for a trial, you are entering into a hostile legal territory. So to avoid that, and also to avoid the expenses, the time, the cost, the best way is to settle those disputes outside of court, which is given legal validity. This is called alternative dispute resolution. It refers to a process where the parties resolve disputes without a court trial. In this process, the parties settle the disputes and they try to work out an amicable solution that protects the interests of both the parties. Usually it's a compromise which is sought under alternative dispute resolution. There's no one side winning the dispute and the other side losing the dispute. Usually it's a compromise which is worked out, which suits the interests of both the parties and hence creates a more amicable environment as compared to a hostile court settlement. In some forms of alternative dispute resolution, there will be a neutral third party involved as well. I will explain the different types of alternative dispute resolution that's available. And in some forms like arbitration, conciliation, etc., a neutral third party will be involved in striking that compromise between the two conflicting parties. So this has become a very popular way of settling disputes, enforcing contracts, and settling such civil and commercial cases, and this has given legal validity in India and around the world. Some of the popular forms of alternate dispute resolution includes arbitration. Arbitration is one of the most popular methods, where a neutral arbitrator, a third party arbitrator, will look at the case, look at the dispute, and finally will deliver an award. A decision is given. It's a little similar to a court judgment, but it's an out-of-court process. So a neutral third-party arbitrator will look at the facts of the case, will look at the evidence presented by both the sides in a non-hostile environment, unlike in a court trial. Based on that, the arbitrator will deliver an award which is binding on the parties. So this is arbitration. Next, you have conciliation, another type of alternate dispute resolution. Even here, a neutral third party is involved, but the neutral third party will communicate with both the sides, exchange information in order to work out a settlement. This is conciliation. Here, no award is given, no final decision is passed like in arbitration. In arbitration, a final decision is given. But in conciliation, the third party will only exchange the information between the two conflicting parties and help them to arrive at a settlement. Then you have negotiation. Negotiation usually occurs directly between the parties involved and their legal counsel. Usually there is no third party involved. There is no mediator in between. The two parties, they will directly talk to each other through their legal counsels and they work out a settlement. So you don't find a third party involvement in negotiation. And then you have mediation, which is a very flexible process which can be used to settle the dispute during any time. As the parties are in conflict at any point of time, they can settle the dispute through mediation by directly engaging with each other, talking to each other and working out an out-of-court settlement. Here as well, no third party is involved and the parties, the disputed parties will talk to each other directly. It's a very flexible mechanism. They mediate a settlement and they settle their dispute. The other alternate dispute resolution mechanism is collaborative law, where both parties are represented by a collaborative attorney and both parties agree not to litigate. Both the parties will have one collaborative attorney who will represent both their interests and both the sides agree not to litigate, meaning they'll not take the case to court. Both will commit that will not file cases against each other and will not get into a hostile court battle. And through the attorney, they'll work out a settlement. So that is collaborative law. So these are the different forms of alternative dispute resolution which has legal validity around the world. In India, 4 types of alternative dispute resolution are recognized. Except for collaborative law, all the other alternative dispute resolutions are given legal validity in India. Arbitration, conciliation, negotiation, mediation, they're all recognized through law in India. You might have even heard about Lok Adalats or the People's Court. This has been given legal validity through the Legal Services Authority Act and the NALSA, the National Legal Services Authority, and the state level legal services authorities. They frequently conduct Lok Adalats, which again provides for such alternate out-of-court dispute settlement mechanisms. This helps in speeding up several disputes, in achieving quick resolutions, in resolving the dispute in a non-hostile environment, reducing the cost involved, the time involved, and reduces the burden on the judiciary. Is that clear? So in the case of India, the whole purpose here is to provide for quick, affordable justice dispensation, and alternate dispute resolution has been given legal recognition through the Arbitration and Conciliation Act of 1996. Is that clear? Arbitration, conciliation, negotiation, etc. They are given legal validity in India. The processes has been set out through the Arbitration and Conciliation Act of 1996. Lok Adalats have been given legal validity through the Legal Services Authority Act that established the NALSA, the National Legal Services Authority. So this is a very effective mechanism for countries like India where there is a lot of judicial backlog involved. In this regard, the writers are arguing that when it comes to arbitration in particular, India is lagging behind. India has fallen behind the rest of the world because arbitration is a preferred mechanism between private businesses to enforce contracts. In the column, they are specifically focusing on contract enforcement and how arbitration can be a very effective alternate dispute resolution to settle these disputes and enforce contracts, which enables the ease of doing business in India. For any private entity to do business in the country, they need ease of doing business. Right? World Bank's ease of doing business report, which currently has been stopped. Under this, India's ranking has definitely increased considerably in the last few years. You see a significant jump in India's ease of doing business ranking in the last few years. Definitely it has become easier for businesses to conduct their business in the country, to start a business, to run, and even to shut down businesses. But ease of doing business is entirely dependent on one crucial aspect, which is enforcing of contracts. In a country, contract enforcement should be simple and effective. That is when two parties will uphold their sides of the deal. That is when business environment will flourish. See, now ease of doing business index has been stopped by World Bank, but still the ranking that we held, right, it does paint a good picture that India has made considerable improvement in improving ease of doing business. But however, when it comes to enforcement of contracts, India is still far behind. We haven't shown much progress since 2006. With regard to enforcement of contracts, India is ranked at the 163rd position, which is a very minor improvement since 2006. So the writers are suggesting that India should focus on arbitration, provide for simple, easy, cost-effective enforcement of contracts so that it will become easier to run and set up businesses in India so that disputes can be settled, contracts can be enforced. This could also give us an opportunity to turn India into an international hub for arbitration. Arbitrations can happen in any jurisdiction. It need not be limited to Indian jurisdiction. Right now, this is the problem. Right now, most Indian companies, they don't have faith in India's arbitration process. They go for settlement in foreign jurisdictions. Singapore, for example, has become a global hub for arbitration, and many big Indian companies, they settle their disputes in Singapore under Singapore's arbitration laws. So India has a similar opportunity. We could emerge as a global hub for arbitration if we can provide for strong contract enforcement through improvements in arbitration process. That's why the writers are urging for online dispute redressal, or online dispute arbitration platform. Now see, if you look at India, when it comes to enforcement of a contract, studies have shown that the cost and time involved in India in enforcing a contract is very high. It's many times higher than that of other similar countries. Studies by World Bank has shown that to enforce a particular contract in India, the average time taken is 4 years, and the cost is 31% higher than the global average. Now you compare this with other similar countries such as Mexico, Brazil, Vietnam. The time taken is much less than half. In Brazil, for example, it takes just 2 years to enforce a contract at 22% lesser cost. In Mexico, it is under 1 year with 33% lesser cost. Same with Vietnam. So these are more attractive jurisdictions for investments. India is losing out on certain investments because investors prefer to go to such countries where it's easy to enforce contracts. In India, 4 years with a 31% higher cost, it's unviable for India to emerge as a major hub. And that is why the writers are calling for online dispute redressal platform to scale up arbitration so that contracts can be enforced effectively. This will enable Indian businesses, Indian companies, even foreign companies to settle their pending disputes, commercial disputes. This is all the more important for India, especially after the LPG reforms of India. In the last 30 years, we have seen phenomenal growth. We get foreign investments, we have signed a lot of bilateral treaties. There are a lot of foreign investors operating in India, foreign companies operating in India. So disputes are bound to arise. There will be contractual issues that will come up. But the lack of resolution methods available within India is pushing the companies outside, looking at jurisdictions like Singapore. And this not only harms the business environment in India, but also we lose out on the opportunity to become a global hub for arbitration. All right. So that is the case being made by the writers. That is their primary argument. See, even though India introduced an arbitration conciliation law in 1996 itself, all right, India is still not seen as an arbitration friendly jurisdiction. This was pointed out by the Sri Krishna Committee. Remember, yesterday we spoke about the Sri Krishna Committee. While talking about the data protection law, we discussed the recommendations of Sri Krishna Committee. The same committee had observed in 2017 that India is not very friendly towards arbitration. We have certain challenges, there are certain problems. For example, in India, there is no institutional arbitration mechanism. Many businesses, they prefer ad hoc arbitration mechanisms, and the institutional structure is not preferred. There is a lack of support from the government, the judiciary, and other concerned institutions. So this is a shortcoming. And also, there is constant interference from the judiciary even after arbitration awards are given. See, the very purpose of alternate dispute resolution is to keep the judiciary out. But after the awards are given, the judiciary still takes appeals on these cases, and if it hears them, if it interferes in these awards, it will derail the whole process of arbitration. This has become a regular practice. Let's say two businesses, they take arbitration, they're not happy with the award, they go to the court and judiciary steps in thus derailing the very purpose of arbitration in the first place. The other problem is government setting aside the awards of arbitration because of public policy concerns. On the grounds of public policy concerns, governments make policy changes which sets aside the awards given through arbitration. This is government's interference which is derailing arbitration process. So these reasons are mainly responsible for India being seen as an unfriendly jurisdiction as far as arbitration and alternate dispute resolution is concerned. Alright, so that is why many businesses, many companies, they prefer to take up these cases in Singapore and not in India. Today, Singapore has become a global hub for enforcement of contracts. Recently, there was one legendary case, one high-profile case. You might be aware of the controversy involving Reliance Industries and Big Bazaar, right, or Future Group of Industries. So there is an ongoing dispute, a litigation involving Amazon and Reliance Industries with regard to their investment, their stakes in the Future Group. So this dispute couldn't be settled in India, and Amazon and Reliance took the case for arbitration in Singapore. Alright, so such high profile cases can be resolved in India through arbitration, and that's why writers are saying we should explore scaling up online dispute redressal as far as arbitration is concerned. See, there have been some improvements in India. It's not that India is still the same as it was before. There have been amendments to the law. The Arbitration Conciliation Act has been amended to fine-tune some of the gaps. The judiciary has reduced its interference to an extent. Even the government has reduced its interference in arbitration awards. It tries not to use public policy as an excuse to interfere with arbitration awards. Despite these improvements which have happened, we are still not able to scale up as a global hub for arbitration. This is the point the writers are trying to make. They say Indian businesses, they still prefer outside jurisdictions. They still prefer to go to Singapore to get disputes resolved through arbitration. So to make this change, the writers are calling for leveraging technology in the field of alternate dispute resolution. The pandemic has already proven this potential. The Indian judiciary itself went virtual. During the pandemic, Supreme Court and High Courts, they all went virtual. The writers are calling for a similar online dispute redressal with regard to alternative dispute resolution as well. But however, when we say online dispute redressal, it simply does not mean just online conferencing or video conferencing facilities. See, that is very simple to set up. Anybody can set up a basic audio video conferencing facility. That alone is not sufficient for online dispute redressal. You also need a sophisticated platform, an IT platform that brings in case management systems. Right? There should be an online database. There should be a multi-channel communication between all the stakeholders and the mediators involved. There should be automated case management systems. It should also enable digital signatures, stamping to enforce the contracts, and it should employ advanced technologies like blockchain, artificial intelligence, machine learning. So you need such a robust platform through which we can take arbitration online, thus eliminate the need for any physical jurisdiction. This will bring down the cost further, save time as well, speed up arbitration process, and it could potentially make India a global hub for arbitration. It will bring numerous benefits to Indian businesses, to companies operating in India. Alright, so that is the argument the writers are making. So they are suggesting a three-step process to ensure that online dispute redressal is adopted as far as arbitration is concerned. First, they are calling for legislative measures through the Parliament. Obviously, legal changes are required as well, so that there is fast-track enforcement, there is legal backing given for online dispute redressal and a legal push given for it. Next, the infrastructural challenges has to be resolved. You need a robust IT platform for this, because as I told you, it's not just an audio video conferencing platform. It should have automated systems, case management systems. It should enable digital signatures and stamping. Bring in modern technologies, emerging technologies like blockchain and artificial intelligence. So this requires a lot of funding. This requires technical skills as well and technical support. This is where the government should play a role. Maybe a dedicated fund can be set up for establishing the infrastructure for online dispute redressal. For example, in the budget, the government has made a separate allocation for facilitating e-courts in the country. To take courts online, to digitize court records, to promote virtual court settlements. The government has taken the initiative of e-courts and dedicated financial allocation is made in the budget. On similar lines, a dedicated fund can be set up for online dispute redressal, for arbitration and alternative dispute resolution. And finally, adoption of the platform. The government can take the lead. Government agencies, government departments, they can make use of online dispute redressal to settle the disputes they are having, to enforce the contracts, which could set a model for the people and the businesses to follow as well. Proactively, the government should play a role in making use of these online dispute redressal platforms. So these are the 3 steps suggested by the writers, which will help in scaling up online dispute redressal as far as arbitration is concerned. All right. So it's a very, very important topic as far as polity is concerned. You should have knowledge on alternate dispute resolution. You should know what is arbitration and the other types of alternate dispute resolution, and where India stands with regard to arbitration. What can we do to make India a global hub for alternate dispute resolution? All right. So that's why I've had a detailed discussion from the scratch, from the basic concept. I hope the topic is clear. Now let's move on to the second article. We have a detailed column in the explained section on page number 8 that helps us understand the role of parliamentary committees in a constitutional democracy. In the Indian Parliament, we have different forms of parliamentary committees that have been set up, that function regularly, and they play a critical role in enabling legislative business. They play a key role in keeping the executive under check. They play a key role in auditing the expenditure, the revenue of the government. So parliamentary committees play a pivotal role in a constitutional democracy. So let's understand more about this key topic. See, parliamentary committees are set up mainly because the parliament itself cannot deal with the minute details involved in lawmaking. See, when you look at parliament, right, the most highlighted event are the parliamentary sessions which happen throughout the year. The budget session, the monsoon session, the winter session. This is what the public get to witness. This is what we as citizens, as public, get to witness, and we assume this is the only functioning or working of the parliament. Trust me, it's not. It's only a small fragment, a small fraction of what you're witnessing. Here, we are reminded of a very popular quote by Woodrow Wilson, a former president of the United States and also a leading public administrator and a public thinker. Woodrow Wilson had stated that Congress in session, when the US Congress is in session, it is only for public exhibition. It's a display to the public. That's only the public part of the work the Congress is doing. But when Congress is at work, the real work is happening in congressional committee rooms. In the US Congress, in the Senate, there are similar committees. There are Senate standing committees, congressional committees. In these committee rooms, in these congressional committees, this is where the real legislative work takes place, according to Woodrow Wilson. This is a very true statement. It's a statement which is valid even today, across geographies, across time. You take the Indian democracy, for example. India is a parliamentary democracy, whereas US has a presidential model. But still, the statement by Woodrow Wilson is very true for India as well, even in today's context. What you see, the parliamentary functioning that you witness, right, that you read about, it is just the public part of it. It's just a small part of it. Tabling of the bill, parties criticizing each other, creating chaos on the floor of the House, voting on the bills. This is just one fraction of it. Presentation of the budget, raising questions against the ministers in the government. This is only a part of the parliamentary work. The real half, the other half of the parliamentary work is shouldered by parliamentary committees. Because when laws are proposed by the government, every clause has to be looked at in detail. You need experts to break down each clause, see whether it fulfills the stated purpose and the objective. See whether the laws are in line with the constitution. See whether it fulfills the long-term objectives of the nation. Is it in national interest? Is the executive misusing its powers? Are there any loopholes in the law? These checks and balances in the parliamentary system, in the lawmaking process, it is being implemented through our parliamentary committees. They are not only reducing the burden of the parliament, because parliamentary sessions cannot look at the details. Now, for example, when finance minister presents the budget, right, you can't expect the MPs to go through the provisions clause by clause while sitting in the house, while participating in the session. It can't happen. That's why a time period is given before the bills are brought in, the finance bill or appropriation bill are brought in for adoption, so that the MPs can study the provisions. There are parliamentary committees dedicated for that. They look at all the provisions clause by clause. They go into the details, the nitty-gritties, and they can come out with criticism, come out with suggestions for amendments. This is how you fine-tune lawmaking in a democracy. And parliamentary committees play a critical role in this. They not only reduce the burden on the parliamentary sessions, but they provide for expertise. They provide for highlighting public concern. Matters of national importance, urgent public importance can be brought up here. Amendments can be suggested against the bills proposed by the government. Right? The executive powers can be kept under check. The government, if it is misusing its powers to bring in laws that are not in line with our constitutional commitments, then the parliamentary committees can step in and push back the government and hold the government accountable. Because eventually the Council of Ministers, they are accountable to the Lok Sabha, right, according to Article 75. So this is where parliamentary committees play a critical role, and this structure has formally evolved at least since 1993. And you can trace back the informal standing committees and parliamentary committees to as far back as India's independence. Right from 1947, right from the days of our Constituent Assembly, parliamentary committees have played a critical role in our lawmaking process. Is that clear? It was given a more formal structure in 1993, and since then we have different types of parliamentary committees set up in Lok Sabha and as well as in the Rajya Sabha. Just look at the infographic here. The parliamentary committees can be broadly divided into standing committees and ad hoc committees. As the name itself indicates, a standing committee is a permanent committee. All right, you might have heard about finance-related standing committees such as Public Accounts Committee. It's one of the most important and most powerful parliamentary committee, because the PAC or Public Accounts Committee, it audits the revenue expenditure of the government, keeps a check on government expenditure. Similarly, you have other important powerful committees like Estimates Committee, Public Undertakings Committee, which keep a check on the functioning of public sector units. All right. So you have such sector specific standing committees which are permanent in nature. They're permanently constituted. All right. The speaker will keep changing the composition, but however, these are permanent standing committees. You also have department related standing committees specific to certain ministries, separate committee for external affairs, a committee for information technology, committee for energy, defense, agriculture, etc. So such standing committees can be set up. These are permanent standing committees. They could be ministry specific, sector specific, issue specific. We can also have ad hoc committees which are set up on a need basis. If any issue comes up, all right, let's say the Controversial Citizenship Amendment Act or the controversial Digital Protection Bill that we discussed yesterday. When such issues come up which needs further inquiry, further debate, then ad hoc committees can also be constituted. Need-based, sector-based ad hoc committees. We can also have a joint parliamentary committee where MPs from both Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha are brought in, and a joint parliamentary committee will look into the particular issue. Again, yesterday we spoke about this. When the Digital Protection Bill, the Personal Data Protection Bill was introduced in 2019, when it triggered a controversy because of its extraordinary provisions, a joint parliamentary committee was set up, which has MPs from both Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. So this committee went into the details of the proposed bill, highlighted the flaws, and pointed out how the government might get excessive powers which could lead to surveillance, which could erode fundamental rights under Article 19. So this joint parliamentary committee suggested many amendments, and this is what pushed the government to withdraw the bill, and now the government is bringing a new bill. So you can see that in function, in action. You can see how parliamentary committees can push the government back and hold the government accountable, and thus provide for a system of checks and balances. Even historically, these committees have done a phenomenal job. They have carried out monumental work which has strengthened Indian democracy and the legislative framework in the country. For example, in the Constituent Assembly, there were important committees. There was one important committee on citizenship laws. Thanks to this committee, the right provisions were included in India's citizenship laws. Similarly, while dealing with issues related to northeast of India, the frontier regions of northeast India, the tribal areas, there is a special committee set up to look into these tribal regions, to understand their local customs, their language, their rights, their livelihood issues. This played a critical role in eventually framing the 6th schedule of the Constitution that has given special status, or it has provided autonomy for tribal areas in Assam, Meghalaya, Mizoram and Manipur, and in Tripura, sorry. Similarly, there was one more committee in the Constituent Assembly looking at the scheduled areas, especially the tribal belt of central India, understanding the challenges of the tribal communities. That committee played a key role in eventually recommending the 5th schedule that provided for special provisions for tribal belts, scheduled areas in the country. So like this, parliamentary committees have played a critical role over the years, and even today they are playing a very, very important role. Is that clear? So this is what the article is talking about. The committees, they go into the details of a specific piece of legislation. They analyze the overall impact on governance and they provide their recommendations. However, please note down a key point. These recommendations are not binding on the government. This is a very important point for your prelims. These recommendations are not binding on the government. The government is not bound to accept the recommendations. But however, it is required to submit an action taken report. Whatever action the government takes based on the recommendations of the standing committee or the ad hoc committees, it should submit an action taken report showing that these recommendations have been accepted, these have not been accepted, or what new changes is the government suggesting to the law to make the law better. So action taken report has to be submitted. This is binding, but recommendations themselves, the reports, they need not be accepted. They are not binding on the government. It's a suggestion to the government. But still, it has enough significance because it does put a lot of pressure on the government. It pushes the government back to consider changes into the law as pointed out by the parliamentarians. Is that clear? That is why the role of parliamentary committees is very, very critical in a constitutional democracy. So it's highly unfortunate that these days in the parliament sufficient debate doesn't take place. Bills are rushed through. Enough time is not given for debate during sessions. But one would assume greater debate would happen later under the parliamentary committees. But even the parliamentary committees have not been functioning quite effectively. There have been instances where ruling parties, they dominate the parliamentary committees and they try to again derail the debates and discussions, and they try to push through the hearings and the discussions. So this is a concern which has come up, which has been pointed out by many legal constitutional experts. But nevertheless, the parliamentary committees continue to play an important role in India's parliamentary democracy. All right. So that is what you need to get from this article. Next, we have a science and technology related article on page number 9. It's related to the Large Hadron Collider project. It just gives you a basic understanding. It's one of the most important global scientific initiatives. So both from a prelims and mains point of view, you need to know what is the Large Hadron Collider. Just the basic details. The Large Hadron Collider, also called the CERN Super Collider. This is a state-of-the-art facility located in Europe. To be precise, it's located in France and Switzerland along the French-Swiss border. It's one of the most advanced scientific facilities in the field of particle physics. Is that clear? It's essentially a particle accelerator. As the name itself indicates, it accelerates particles, specifically subatomic particles such as hadrons. The term hadron itself here refers to a subatomic particle. It's called the Large Hadron Collider because it's a very, very large facility. You can't even imagine the size of this. It's present below the surface, around 175 meters beneath the French-Swiss border near Geneva, and the whole circumference of the project, it's essentially a tunnel. There are 2 tunnels built. and the whole circumference of the tunnel is more than 27 kilometers. So imagine the size, the scale of this facility. It's a massive facility. That's why it's a large hadron collider. Hadron here refers to subatomic particles which are accelerated through these tunnels. All right, and it's a collider because these particles are made to collide, to release energy, to release new particles, to bring out new masses which are detected and studied. All right. So this project, global collaborative project, is called CERN, European Organization for Nuclear Research, and it involves assistance and involvement from around the world. There are thousands of scientists, researchers from around the world, including from India. Institutions from around the world are participating in this global initiative. All right. Indian institutes like Baba Atomic Research Center, Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, Indian Institute of Science, the Raman Institute in India. All these key institutes which work in the field of particle physics are participating in this global ambitious project. All right. The main purpose of this project is to detect the Higgs boson particle, or also called the God particle, to determine dark matter, dark energy, essentially to understand the universe, to unravel the origins, to look at the Big Bang, understand how particles gain mass. All right. So there are two tunnels essentially in which these subatomic particles are accelerated by using superconducting magnets. These are extremely powerful superconducting magnets. They have to be cooled to very, very low temperatures. So liquid helium is used to cool down the superconducting magnets, and they accelerate these particles around the tunnel, around the tube. It's a high vacuum tube. All right, inside the tubes, a very high level, ultra high vacuum is maintained. It's a completely airtight environment which is created with very low temperature conditions, and the superconducting magnets, they accelerate the particles around the tunnel. This results in the beams, in the accelerated beams of particles to collide with each other, and the collision will generate more particles like quarks, muons and the others. It generates energy, new particles get formed as well, and you need hypersensitive detectors to sense and detect these particles and the energy that is getting released. So 9 advanced detectors are set up here. 2 popular ones are ATLAS and the CMS. These are the 2 detectors which discovered the Higgs boson particle in 2012, which was experimentally confirmed in 2013 as well. The God particle, the Higgs boson particle, right, which underlies particle physics and Einstein's theory of relativity, was discovered through this facility. All right. There's other detectors as well, like ALICE. These are some popular detectors. In total, there are 9 detectors. These are very sensitive, hypersensitive instruments which can detect these matters, these particles which are getting released following the collision between these high energy particles. All right. So this is the basic you need to understand. There is more technical details involved, of course, if you look at the standard model of physics, and if you understand the quantum world, right, you can go in detail, but it's not necessary from an examination point of view. Just the basics here is sufficient. Just understanding that it's a particle physics experiment, it's a particle accelerator where superconducting magnets are used to accelerate subatomic particles. They are made to collide, following which the matter, the energy, the particles released are detected for further studies. All right, this is crucial for detecting the Higgs boson particle and as well as for furthering research in the field of standard model of physics, to understand the supersymmetry, which is the current model on which researchers believe that the universe is based on. So it helps in unraveling the mysteries of the universe, the very formation, the very evolution of the universe. So that is the purpose of this project. It's a global initiative, and the topic could be very relevant for your prelims, even to an extent to your mains. There could be a 10-mark question asking you to explain what is the Large Hadron Collider. All right. So this completes my discussion on the big articles. Now we'll move on to the prelims section and look at 5 small articles that are relevant for your prelims. All right. Let's start with article number 1. On page number 1, we have this article related to consumer inflation in the country. According to the article, consumer inflation has declined. It has gone down below 6% mark for the first time in this year. The consumer inflation has been registered at around 5.66% in March 2023. It's a good news because inflationary tendencies were very high in the last couple of years. Especially during pandemic, the monetary policy was relaxed. There was a lot of liquidity in the markets. So inflation started shooting up from 2021 onwards. So to manage the inflation levels, RBI started adopting a conservative monetary policy. It started hiking the interest rates. But finally, the monetary policy transmission has happened. You get to see a decline in inflation rates. It's come down to manageable levels. It's within the target set for the Monetary Policy Committee of the RBI. The Monetary Policy Committee is expected to keep inflation levels in the range of 2 to 6%. It's expected to keep inflation levels in the range of 2 to 6%. The ideal target is 4% inflation, but the maximum range allowed is 2 to 6%. So as inflation has dropped to 5.66%, it's come back within manageable range for the RBI. That's why RBI recently paused the monetary policy. It has paused the hike in repo rates. All right. So that is on one side, which is the current trend in the economy. The current trend here is that there is a slight drop in inflation, which is a positive development. And this is a big relief for the rural economy especially. Food prices have gone down. Fuel prices have slightly declined. And energy prices have gone down. So this is very good news for the rural economy, for farmers and for agriculture. But for the urban economy, there has been no big change as such. But still the slight drop in inflation is a positive indicator. Now, the core topic here to understand is what is inflation? How is inflation measured? Just the basics behind it. Let me take you through this. See, inflation is the rate at which prices are increasing over a certain period of time. When you take a certain commodity and measure the price today and measure the price again 1 year later, right? The extent of increase which has happened during this time period is your inflation, right? So it's the increase in the cost of commodity over a given period of time. This is an indicator of overall increase in prices in the economy. When you take a basket of goods, essential goods, if you keep track of these prices and see how they are performing on a year-to-year basis, month-to-month basis, you get an idea about inflation levels in the country, and this helps you understand the cost of living in the country. It's one of the key indicators to manage the macroeconomic credentials of the country. It leads to determine the monetary policy of the country. It helps in managing liquidity levels. It helps in giving a push for growth or scaling back liquidity in the markets. All these key decisions are based on your inflation numbers. All right. So how do we measure inflation? Inflation can be measured at two levels, either at the wholesale level or at the consumer level, that is at the retail level. Because wholesale level inflation at the level of wholesale dealers, at the level of businesses, companies is different. Whereas the inflation incurred by the average customer, the citizens, at the retail level is different. So WPI and CPI are the two indices that we use to measure wholesale and retail inflation. All right. CPI primarily measures retail inflation, gives us an idea about the average consumer's cost of living in the country. The RBI conducts a household inflation expectation survey to identify which basket of commodities should be tracked. What are the most common purchased items by a common person? Right? To keep track of this, RBI conducts a household inflation expectation survey based on which the basket of goods are determined, which need to be tracked. The CPI, which is the retail inflation, it helps you understand the changes happening at the consumer level, at the level of your retail shops. So this gives an idea about the standard of living in the country, the cost of living being incurred by the common people, right? That's how the government, the central bank can understand what's the burden on the common man. If food prices are shooting up, if energy prices are shooting up, if essential commodities are going up in prices, the only way for the government and central bank to understand this is your inflation numbers, especially retail inflation numbers. WPI, on the other hand, captures inflation at the wholesale level, and both are key indicators. They are policy indicators. All right. But when it comes to retail inflation, that is CPI, you have headline inflation, which is inflation in all the commodities selected in the basket. But within the basket, there might be few volatile commodities, such as food and also fuel items, energy items. they are very volatile. For example, the prices of vegetables, fruit, cereals, meat, dairy products, they keep fluctuating because of seasonal changes, global changes in the market. The prices of food items keep fluctuating. So it doesn't give you a stable number. It doesn't give you a stable picture. Same with fuel and energy prices, petrol, diesel prices, for example, LPG prices, for example. They keep fluctuating with global oil markets. So for policymakers to get a better idea about retail inflation, they also use one more indicator here called core inflation numbers. To arrive at core inflation, what they do is they deduct or they take out food and fuel energy commodities from headline inflation. From your headline CPI inflation, if you keep out food and energy, which are the most volatile, the inflation numbers you get is your core inflation. All right, that is the basic difference between headline and core inflation as far as CPI is concerned. So in the CPI index, there is a basket of 299 commodities. Various goods and services are part of it, as brought out by the RBI's household survey, and different commodities are given a certain weightage. For example, food, beverages have a certain weightage, housing, clothing, fuel and energy, they're all given a certain percentage in the basket. All right. So the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation brings out the CPI index. It brings out the headline inflation numbers. This you're seeing here is the headline inflation. From this, if you minus food and fuel and energy, if you take these two out, then what you get is your core inflation. So core inflation is basically your headline inflation minus food and energy. All right. Similar CPI indices are brought out for industrial workers, for rural areas and urban areas as well by the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. So these are key policy indicators for the government and also for the central bank. The next article, again from page number 1, it refers to the ongoing surge in COVID cases in the country. A fresh wave of COVID cases have begun in the last few weeks. I'm sure many of you would be aware of this. There is a rapid increase which is happening in the number of cases. That's why the government of India, the state governments, they're all gearing up for the upcoming challenge. They are going back to the COVID era measures. Mask is being again made mandatory. Social distancing is being recommended again, right? And hospitals are gearing up for an increase in the load of patients. ICUs are being set aside. Oxygen is being arranged. So India is preparing for a possible impact of the next wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. This wave of the pandemic is being driven by one variant, one particular variant of the SARS coronavirus 2, that is XBB.1.16 variant. It is essentially a sub-variant of the Omicron variant. The Omicron variant, which emerged in 2022 and led to a big surge in early 2022, it has further mutated. As you know, viruses, they keep mutating, right? The genetic structure keeps undergoing recombination and it has given rise to new mutations. There are hundreds of variants of SARS coronavirus 2 today. And one of the primary variants driving the surge in cases in India is the XBB.1.16 variant, which is a sub-variant of the Omicron variant. This variant has spread from India to many other countries as well through international travel. In US, Singapore as well, cases are being reported. But in India, the dominant strain currently, as of now, the most dominant SARS coronavirus 2 strain is this sub-variant. So just know the name and know the class it belongs to. It belongs to the Omicron variant. Just the basic details regarding what is driving the current surge in COVID-19 cases. In fact, in today's paper, we even have an editorial regarding how India should prepare for the upcoming surge. But thankfully, the surge is not leading to severe cases or hospitalizations. The hospitalization is still very manageable. It's still very low, because this variant that I spoke about, it's not known to cause very serious infection. All right. Of course, those who have a compromised immune system, those who have other conditions, old people, for example, young children, pregnant women, right, and those suffering from other conditions like HIV, diabetes, etc. Of course, they are still highly vulnerable. A lot of deaths are being reported in the last few days. But however, the variant which is currently leading the surge is not as devastating as the previous variants, like the Delta variant, for example. All right, the mortality rate is pretty low. However, its transmission rate is very high. Studies have shown, genomic studies have shown that this particular subvariant of Omicron has undergone a specific mutation which is allowing the virus to quickly transmit, to quickly jump and evade the immune response. See, most of us have built up immunity either through prior infection or through vaccination. But still this subvariant is able to evade the immune response and still it is infecting people at a fast rate. All right. So this is the concern here. The transmission rate, its immunity evading abilities, that is a concern. But thankfully, it's not leading to very serious cases. So hospitalization is pretty low, but still it is a concern. It's a major threat for those with other conditions. Those who are suffering from comorbid conditions, it is still extremely dangerous. All right. Now, let's look at the next article from page number 11 related to social justice. The Supreme Court has referred to a very, very important committee called Ranganath Mishra Committee on Religious and Linguistic Minorities. Not many of you would have heard about this because this committee was constituted in the year 2004 and the committee submitted its report in the year 2007. So let me help you understand what this committee dealt with. The Ranganath Mishra Commission, it was set up as the National Commission for Religious and Linguistic Minorities in the year 2004. As the name itself indicates, its main purpose was to provide recommendations to ensure the socio-economic welfare of religious minorities and linguistic minorities in the country. It went into the conditions faced by religious and linguistic minorities in the country and came out with a set of recommendations, including recommendations on reservation. All right. One of the recommendations given by this committee is very controversial as well, and the government has subsequently rejected it. The government has repeatedly informed the Supreme Court that it's not accepting the recommendations of this commission because in the report which was submitted in 2007, the Ranganath Mishra Commission had recommended that Dalits should be given quotas under the scheduled category, under scheduled caste category, even if they have converted to other religions. Essentially, the committee said, since Dalits are at the very bottom rung of the society, they have been historically oppressed, their socio-economic conditions are still vulnerable even today. The commission had said that de-link them from their religion, because many Dalits would have converted to Buddhism or Islam or Christianity. All right. So to account for their socio-economic deprivation, the commission said Dalits should be de-linked from their religious status and they should be made neutral like scheduled tribes. Scheduled tribes to enjoy the benefits of reservation under the ST category, their religion doesn't matter. Similarly, Ranganath Mishra Committee had said that Dalits should be given reservation quotas irrespective of which religion they belong to. All right. So this was one of the controversial recommendations which had led to a political controversy as well. But government has not accepted this recommendation. So the Supreme Court, which was looking at issues related to Dalits and minorities in with regard to religious communities, the Supreme Court has asked the government whether it is considering quota for Dalit converts. The question has come up again. It's the second time the Supreme Court is asking the government whether the Mishra Committee recommendations are suitable for providing reservation for Dalit converts who are converted to other faiths. All right. So without getting into the political aspect of it, just knowing what the commission dealt with, right, and what was the key recommendation in itself can be very important for your exams. Next, the 7th article from page number 12 again, we will talk about a very important organization called International Civil Aviation Organization. This UN body is in news because the aviation watchdog of the United States, the Federal Aviation Administration or FAA, it has reviewed India's civil aviation safety record and it has placed India under category 1 status. See, this is a US security mechanism for civil aviation. Alright, at the global level, we have a UN body called International Civil Aviation Organization, which comes out with global standards for civil aviation safety. The US which seeks to implement these standards within its airspace. It certifies other countries and their aviation standards to see whether it is in line with the UN standards. So India's standards have always met the UN standards, and even with regard to US, India has been placed under category 1. The aviation watchdog FAA of the US has placed India's aviation safety under category 1, meaning India follows the global standards laid down by this UN body. The development itself is not important for the exam, but the organization can be very important. The International Civil Aviation Organization. It's a specialized agency of the United Nations which is headquartered at Montreal in Canada. It was established in the year 1944 through the Chicago Convention. These facts are very, very important. India is a member of this organization. We follow these standards laid out by the International Civil Aviation Organization. India's DGCA, the Directorate General of Civil Aviation, is bound to uphold the commitments made here. It's an international commitment. This UN specialized body comes out with aviation safety standards for the whole world, for the entire civil aviation sector in the world. Alright? And these standards have to be followed and implemented by the member countries. And that is exactly what India has been doing. And that's the reason why US has placed India under category 1. Alright? These basic facts. When was it set up? Is it a UN specialized agency? It was set up through Chicago Convention. It's headquartered at Montreal in Canada. These basic facts are very important, and of course India being a member is also very important. You can get a factual prelims question here. Now coming to the last topic, again from page number 12, it's related to history. NCERT has attracted a lot of controversy of late by deleting and omitting several key aspects of Indian history. Right? Now it has been pointed out that references related to India's first education minister, Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, has been dropped from NCERT history textbooks. This is in addition to the other omissions which have been done with regard to Mughal history and few aspects related to Jammu and Kashmir and the constitution making process in India. So a lot of key chapters from Indian history, modern history, have been dropped from history textbooks. This no doubt has generated a lot of political controversy again. But for the sake of exam, we'll not get into the political controversy. That's immaterial to us here. But let's take a look at Maulana Abul Kalam Azad. This is an opportunity to talk about one of India's leading freedom fighters, India's first education minister, and the stellar role he played in India's freedom struggle. There could be a history question, either in prelims or mains, on Maulana Abul Kalam Azad. Maulana Azad was born in today's Saudi Arabia, in Mecca. Alright? His father was a Muslim scholar from Bengal with Afghan ancestry. Following the 1857 revolution, the first war of Indian independence, he had left India. He moved to Middle East, where he had married an Arab wife, and they had a son who was Maulana Abul Kalam Azad. So Azad would come back to India later, but Azad was known for always prioritizing education. He himself was very well educated. He had mastered multiple languages including Urdu, Persian, Hindi, English and Bengali, and even Arabic. And he was known for his journalistic skills, for his writing skills. He brought out several journals and magazines which became very popular after he returned to India. In fact, at the age of 12, he had already started a monthly magazine called Lisan-Us-Siddiq. Please remember the names of such magazines, journals written by our freedom fighters. That could come as a prelims question. Maulana Azad took deep interest in India's nationalism, in India's freedom struggle, and he was a champion of Hindu-Muslim unity. He was firmly against the idea of partition. He opposed the Muslim League. He opposed leaders like Jinnah and the radical idea of partitioning India on communal lines. He stood for Hindu-Muslim unity. He even opposed the partition of Bengal in 1905, which was carried out by Lord Curzon. Alright? So in that regard, Maulana Azad is seen as a leader of national integrity, promoting national integrity, promoting unity amongst different communities. And he was influenced by Aurobindo Ghosh, Shyam Sundar Chakravarti, and he did participate in all the key aspects of our freedom struggle, including the non-cooperation movement. He believed in Gandhian principles and ideals. He took up the principle of non-violence, ahimsa and satyagraha. He protested against the Rowlatt Act of 1919, protested the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, supported the Khilafat movement, backing the Caliph in Turkey, also took part in the Quit India movement later and supported Swaraj, complete self-rule, including the Swadeshi movement and boycott movement. He was a leading figure in all these key aspects of Indian history, and he became the youngest president of the Congress party at the age of 35. All right, please remember this very, very important point. He's seen as the youngest president of the Indian National Congress. He went to jail as well on multiple occasions as the British saw him as a major threat, and he not only stood up against partition, he also strongly supported Hindu-Muslim unity, communal harmony in the country. Post-independence, under Prime Minister Nehru, Maulana Azad was appointed as India's first education minister, and many big initiatives were taken during his term. The UGC that you have today, the University Grants Commission, and India's elite institutions like IITs, Indian Institute of Technology, they were all set up during his term as India's first education minister. So that is the stellar contribution of Maulana Azad to our education sector and, more importantly, to our freedom struggle. All right? Remembering these basic historical facts could be very helpful for your prelims. There can be such questions on historical figures. You can even expect a mains question, a detailed question on the life and contribution of Maulana Azad. And these facts are essential to write such answers. All right? So on this note, I would like to bring my discussion to an end. Please take up the mains practice questions. I hope everyone takes these questions seriously. This helps you improve your answer writing skills. Write your answers and post them in the answer writing portal, for which link has been given in the description below. These topics have already been discussed. I've kept the discussion in such a way that if you paid attention, if you made some notes, you can easily write a structured answer for these two questions. All right? So do let me know how the session went. I'll see you again tomorrow. And don't forget to go to the Telegram channel right now, because we'll have a quiz on some of these topics to help you revise these topics immediately. All right? So that's it from my end. Thanks for watching. Do like the video, subscribe to our channel, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you. Have a good day.